And ultimately, when you pay attention to what's happening with this technology right now, it's really what's happening involving Ripple is going to shape the greater context of what we see involving all cryptocurrencies and how these things tend to move forward respectively, and significance to what's happening in Ripple involving Japan. And really, there's a lot of international variables that are coming together involving Ripple. And it's actually already been live in Japan for pretty much a full 24 hours because they're a day ahead of us, and those of us in the United States. And of course, it's it's the 4th right now, but it is interesting to be paying attention to these various different developments as they've been taking place, involving the greater context of the technology and the various different established deals that are being made across the board with all these different institutions. And I understand a lot of people criticize Ripple for being the banking crypto, but ultimately I see a lot of potential in store for Ripple because of a lot of the things that along those similar lines. I would say that Ripple is definitely one of those technologies moving forward that's really going to be at the front and center when it comes to these various different developments that are happening. Of course, when you have to take into consideration Litecoin from a fully realistic perspective, you have to think about it. Who's going to be paying taxes on there, like to go into Starbucks and buy a coffee using a Litecoin? It's just not going to happen anytime soon. What's happening is people are using their real USD or their euro. These are the dominant currencies right now, and of course, I don't completely I wouldn't shit on Litecoin because it is tied in with the greater cryptocurrencies as they exist as sort of a investment class of item. But of course, it's going to take these technologies that are ultimately establishing themselves, really rubbing shoulders with the banks and the institutions and so forth. And Ripple in particular just is getting itself front and center when it comes to a lot of these different household names, when you take into consideration what we've seen happening between Ripple and Apple, of course, and of course Santander Bank, and all these different variables that are really putting Ripple in an interesting position in the context of how you consider mass adoption to be taking place. And ultimately, because Bitcoin sort of has its own reputation, and so does Ethereum, but I think Ripple is often overlooked. I understand. Another thing to take into consideration is the obvious, the circulating supply, and that's obviously a devastating factor for a lot of people. But of course, I think that it is also something we said, how Ripple deletes a little bit of XRP every time there's a transaction. So overall, it is one of those, when you take into consideration inflationary versus deflationary, as far as like a long-term perspective on these things, Ripple does have some certain perspectives in that regard. But just thinking about the long-term, the roadmap that's ahead for Ripple, I think that there are a lot of interesting things that are in store for the technology, as we've seen a lot of this, a lot of the potential before. But certainly, we look at the news regarding Ripple, and in the past few days, we've actually seen a lot of huge things happening, and of course, the various things happening on an international scale, of course, which is really what's important when it comes to cryptocurrencies, because when you take into consideration all these technologies on here, It's my theory that a lot of these cryptos in the top 100 probably won't even exist in the next few years, because it's such an evolving space, and you kind of have to take into consideration how the value of Bitcoin could be inflated to a high degree. I mean, certainly, I think that Bitcoin does have significant value where it is right now, but of course, you just have to understand like how much of the value that we see is due to the hype, and of course it's so all that fluctuation that we see, something going from being worth oh, now it's worth 20,000, now it's worth this amount. Like as we continue to move along, irrespectively to the greater context of the history of these technologies, we're going to see the actual value stabilize. So I mean, that's also something to take into consideration, is how I mean, you have to take the good with the bad, but these are the sort of the wild west days, and of course with the introduction of these various different deals, it sort of is the greater establishment in the larger society at large really coming into coordination with the technologies and learning how to work hand in hand with them. But of course, I mean, looking at the market, I mean, we're at 335 right now, and of course we've seen that I mean, we're not entirely being devastated and just moving downward. I mean, of course there is a little bit of signs of upward mobility, but I mean, in the greater context of things, I would say for me, Ripple is just a long-term perspective. And of course, you know, there are a lot of different variables, but yeah, just so how's the chat going, everybody? Is everybody doing good? Yeah, so I think that also it's important to you know, check out a lot of other things. Yeah, so we're gonna actually go and check out some just like random YouTube videos that I was watching that I found interesting. So there's this guy, Crypto Nomad, who has made this video, Ripple XRP breaking news, and this is a video that really went into detail about the basically what's happening in Japan currently, and I think that everybody should go and subscribe to this channel, just because it's a great I thought that this guy had a really good perspective when it came to you know, all these different things. So I'm actually going to be just gonna plop the link to his video down in the description down here if anybody's interested in watching that when the stream is concluded and all that. But yeah, I mean, I think that there are a lot of interesting cryptocurrency YouTubers out there. Have you guys heard of the Crypto Twins? These guys are kind of cool. They're the these guys, they had another YouTube channel where they had like 1 million subscribers or something like that, and now they're starting to branch out, probably because they like cryptocurrency so much or whatever. But I mean, I don't know. I think it's funny to see how I mean, this definitely does play into a mass adoption of in popularity of cryptocurrencies to a larger extent. And of course, I mean, YouTube really is a driving force when it comes to how these things are moving along. But I just think it's funny because these guys have another channel that has like 1 million subscribers, but when it comes to cryptocurrency channels, I have more subscribers than them at the time of making this video, and honestly, that makes me feel good. But no, I'd recommend that you guys go and check these guys out. But of course, I mean, Ripple really is interesting technology, and I think in comparison to Bitcoin, and in comparison to the actual like application, I think that popularity is going to be a huge variable moving forward, and in particular when it comes to the competition aspect of the way that things have been moving along. I mean, Ripple is definitely one to keep an eye on, in particular when you take into consideration how much progress technologies like Ethereum and Litecoin have shown in such a short time span, just with basically reputation in and of itself. itself. And of course, we've seen Ripple exchange places with that #2 position in the context of Ethereum, in the overall placement of at large, the greater representations of cryptos. But I'd say ultimately we're going to be seeing a wave of interest. I mean, I think people are becoming more and more interested in Ripple, and there is obviously a great community. We've seen a lot of interest already involving these like international variables, and this is why I find it important to pay attention to technologies like Ripple. I understand it gets criticized a lot for being the banking crypto, and the establishment isn't exactly welcome in the overall context of the greater philosophies of cryptocurrency, where people had the more idealistic ideas of liberation through Bitcoin and all that. But I think that my interests ultimately lie in the realms of what's going to be worth more money in a short amount of time. And I mean, of course, there are some pretty smart people who've been given Bitcoin some clout. So I'm definitely sticking with Litecoin and all these different things. I mean, don't get me wrong, and I like my Bitcoin, I like my Ripple and all these, but I mean, I know a lot of people don't love Ripple, but then you're sort of forced to pay attention to it. And with me, it is sort of a love-hate relationship when it comes to Ripple, but ultimately it does pique my interest, and I think that it's something that really can't be ignored, because it's obvious. Anybody who's paying attention, those of us who've been involved with cryptocurrency for any amount of years, we pretty much see the significance as it's been building. So yeah, just going down the line, I mean, obviously, I have faith in the future of Bitcoin. I think that, of course, there are a lot of different variables that have been coming together, and there's always good old John McCafe to think about, and of course his predictions with how much Bitcoin's going to be worth, and yeah, I mean, the expenditure of energy by man-machine. This guy is just a nut job. I mean, I like him. Don't get me wrong. I just hope he doesn't have to chop his balls off or whatever he said he was going to do if Bitcoin wasn't worth whatever he said it was going to be worth. But that'll be an interesting day. Maybe I'll do a live stream on the date that he said that, and hopefully by then Bitcoin will be worth $1 million or whatever. But I mean, yeah, I mean, so it is interesting. Obviously, if you guys want, you can follow me on my Twitter. I think that it's a great resource to share information regarding the cryptocurrencies and so forth. And of course, there'll be a link to my Twitter down in the description down below. But all that being said, standard disclaimer: this is not financial advice. This video is for entertainment, educational purposes only. Remember, I'm not your dad. I'm not your dad, and this is but of course, on this channel we are building a family. So it's a weird family. It's not a nuclear family, but of course it is a family nonetheless, and it's just based around cryptocurrencies and sharing our perspectives on them and so forth. But yeah, ultimately I think that I'm definitely interested in seeing how the summer is going to play out for Ripple. And of course, with the we're in Q2 now of 2018. And I think ultimately anything can happen, especially when you take into consideration that variables on an international scale are essentially what leads us to be seeing these technologies where they are now. But yeah, I mean, Neo, I feel good about Neo. I think Neo is a interesting technology I'm definitely paying attention to. TRON, I've made videos about TRON before. TRON is essentially right up there, almost the same price as a Ripple at the current. 06, and then 666. Too many sixes, you know what I mean? But yeah, you feel me? You know what I'm saying? Trying to make just a bad joke there. But yeah, you guys. So what? Don't talk about Neo. No, you don't like Neo. Ripple. Yeah, Ripple's a good one. But yeah, so if you guys want, just tell me whatever cryptos you want to talk about in the comments, and maybe I'll talk about them. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting to see how talk about XRP Ethereum, Electronium, yeah. So yeah, I mean, we go through it. We've got Stellar. Stellar is definitely going to be interesting. With long term for me is probably within it's years. I mean, I'm saying, like, when I say long term, like, I'm ready to ride these technologies down to down to the ground. You know, I'm ready to, because I think that there's certainly a future in store for crypto, when you consider how technology has been advancing over the you know, greater humanity's development. I mean, it's only the next logical step that the internet's going to be implemented a lot more respectively across the board. So any technology that's really leveraging the more decentralized aspects of the internet, and I know that there is a problem when it comes to Ripple involving the decentralized versus centralized you know, components of the technology and how things have been you know, moving forward. And but I mean, ultimately, I'm definitely paying attention to the fact that there is a really good sale, you know, going on from my perspective. You know, in my opinion, I'd say that you know, I remember you know, from time to time things are up in crypto and then things are down, and ultimately what you have to pay attention to, because when things are finally up, everybody's going to be remembering these days from, you know, and wishing that they were hopping on board, and that's ultimately tends to be the case with cryptocurrencies. Me personally, I remember a few years ago I was involved with cryptocurrency because you know, I've been just to give you a little bit of history, you know, I've been involved, you know, I've been involved with cryptocurrencies, paying attention to it for quite a long time now, since around like 2011, you know, 2012. And it's, you know, I remember back then people were saying similar things about Bitcoin and all that. And I mean, it's interesting to see how the public consciousness has developed respectively in coordination with what these technologies offer. But me personally, I'm very interested in the altcoins right now. I'm really interested in you know, seeing how these technologies that are actually providing a service, and you know, all those you know, how the ones that are, I mean, that's honestly the ones that I think are going to be having the larger impact on a more realistic scale when it comes to how these developments have been happening, and you know, what we've been seeing so far respectively across the board when it comes to cryptocurrency and the you know, greater acceptance of the possibilities that are made available by these technologies on a more international scale. And I think that it's really big in countries that have a lot of development to do. I think that ultimately these when we see in the news that you know, Ripple and so forth really making these you know, obviously these various things happening you know, on a higher level scale, but I mean, obviously seeing things happening in Japan and then correlating with what's happening in Europe, ultimately I think you know, Ripple is one of those technologies that has a big future, a significant future in store for it. And I mean, certainly I'm definitely interested. Of course, I'm also interested in Cardano. I think that smart contracts are going to be big as things continue, and we've seen a lot of activity in the greater context of what's been happening involving Cardano. But of course, it is always important to take into consideration the circulating supply of all of every single one of these, because that is ultimately a big variable when you overall you know, look at the context. But I think Dash, any privacy coin, is going to be pretty interesting moving forward. And of course, I would say NEM, definitely looking into VeChain is interesting. Ethereum Classic, I still have some faith for Ethereum Classic. ultimately, I think that we're going to be seeing a lot of interest in a lot of these different technologies as things have been continuing to progress from this point along a logical timeline. So it is, I mean, ultimately my understanding of Ripple is fundamentally data driven, and I find that it's important to maintain a perspective of it that really takes into consideration a multitude of variables, including the team that's working on it. And but I mean, of course, SBI launches Japan's first bank-owned cryptocurrency. That's very huge news. Of course, I mean, we've got CNN, not even just the normal like global coin reports. You know, I mean, this is like international groundbreaking stuff right here, and it's tied directly in with Ripple. So today really is a big day, like historical, in fact, when it comes to you know, how these things have been developing and what we've been seeing happening with the greater acceptance of these technologies at large. But Ripple pumps 50 million into academic research on blockchain. Really, like, these are going to be the things that pay off in the long term, in my opinion. And I mean, it's just, what other cryptocurrencies do you guys see basically having these sort of you know, it's just an interesting way to see these variables all sort of coming together. I mean, how Ripple will suddenly respond to the launch of SBI virtual currencies exchange. So yeah, I mean, a lot of variables happening involving exchanges and the greater context of crypto as it exists as a whole. So ultimately, I think that there really is a lot of potential in store as we see Ripple developing hand in hand with this sort of public acceptance of the technology. And I think that ultimately, when you take into consideration a lot of these different variables, you know, the days of when we were seeing the public really getting excited about Bitcoin, I mean, they are dwindling to a certain extent. And because, I mean, when was the last time you saw a huge groundbreaking thing that was happening involving Bitcoin? But I mean, right now, the focus that I have is more on these altcoins. And I mean, when it comes to my perspective, I'm usually the guy running out when everybody else is running in, or I'm the guy who's running in when everybody else is running out, because I think that it's important to, you know, I'm more of a free thinker when it comes to this space, and that's why I encourage everybody to sort of do your own research. And hey, we got 69 viewers. That's funny. And 69, who out there likes Tekashi 69? But yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm a free thinker when it comes to everything. So I'd say, and especially cryptocurrencies. And I think that right now I'm definitely paying attention to these altcoins and the potential that's being shown in the greater, you know, larger context of these things. Yeah, so yeah, ultimately I think that there is a lot. I mean, I would say in the context of like 2 years, that's actually not even that far away. You just have to think about it in like, if this was the stock market, there would be and then something like that was as I mean, in these sort of things were happening involving the stock. I mean, it would be crazy. It would be all anybody was ever talking about. The thing is, people are used to cryptocurrency, and people have gotten themselves used to this sort of thing. So it's definitely you know, there's a way to approach it, and then of course there's a multitude of variables to take into consideration. But I mean, ultimately, you know, I think that it is interesting though. But yeah, all that being said, I hope that you guys have enjoyed the stream. Remember to go and follow us on our official Twitter and so forth. You know, links to that are always in the description. Yeah, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of Crypto Clout. I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good one.